everybody. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Jonathan Su. I will be hosting the webinar today. We'll be talking about setting up real-time dashboards using the Zerion Reports web service. We have a special guest today, Mr. Ben Ray, who's a solutions engineer here, will be sharing his knowledge and expertise with us and helping us talk through some of the initial considerations and then showing us the steps involved with setting up these dashboards that you're able to use to do real-time analytics. So moving forward, we've got a couple of announcements and some news and some updates. So to start things off, I want to go ahead and announce that we have a Form Builder recertification that will be taking place on May 23rd and 25th. So if you're already Form Builder certified and you're looking to get recertified, that's going to be a great opportunity to do so. I know that a lot of people who have the current certification may be wanting to learn how to use the new Form Builder, and so that's going to be a fantastic opportunity to do that. If you're not Form Builder certified yet, we are offering a certification on June 20, 21, and 22. So that's going to be a 3-day certification, whereas the recertification is only 2 days. And that's going to be a good opportunity for you to gain a good amount of expertise in form building and learning how to enhance your data collection projects. Another big news announcement is that we will be very soon releasing the newest Zerion web service called Zerion Documents. Documents is going to allow you to generate PDF, HTML, Word, or Excel documents from a template using merge fields from your data. So you'll be able to take the data that you've collected and then dynamically generate documents off of those. And so that will be released next week, actually. So keep an eye out for that. In terms of upcoming webinars, we have 3 webinars coming up for the remainder of April. The first one is actually going to be a 3-part webinar. It's going to be focused on JavaScript and JSON, and I will be leading that webinar. So it's 3 parts. Each one is going to be 30 minutes. So that will be on April 18th, 19th, and 20th. The goal of that webinar or that training is to give people who are new to programming or who are unfamiliar with JavaScript an opportunity to begin learning the language. We use JavaScript quite frequently in form building, and then in addition to that, JSON is another part of that language that we will be discussing because you'll see it in a lot of the other Zerion web services like the data flow automation service. The next webinar coming up is a weekly series actually, titled Transformation Tuesdays. I'm really excited to start this one up on the 25th. That will be our inaugural episode. And basically what we'll be doing during those broadcasts is I will be taking requests, or what I like to frame them as is transformation challenges that will be submitted by customers. And so if you all have a transformation challenge that you have with your data, whether it is something like taking your subform data and trying to flatten it, or trying to convert certain values into another format, I'll be taking one, working out the solution, and presenting it each week. And so that's going to be a weekly broadcast, and I'm really excited to get that started. And then the last webinar we're going to have in April is going to be 4 overlooked ways to supercharge your forms. So what I've done for this webinar is I've taken 4 form building techniques that are often overlooked and that will provide a tremendous boost to the way your forms work. We'll be talking about reference IDs, which are a powerful tool that not a lot of people utilize because I feel like there's a lot of people don't even know what they do. And so I wanted to go ahead and present some of these things that you're able to do with your form building that may have been overlooked when you initially started building out those forms. Now, before I hand this over to Ben, I do want to release a couple of polls real quickly. So this first poll is just going to ask if you're a current user. Awesome, everyone has voted now. So it looks like, Ben, just so you know, the majority of people are iForm Builder only customers, but 78%. And the other 22 are actually Zerion customers. So we have a nice mix there. And I have one other poll to launch before I hand the reins over to Ben. And we're curious to see how you all currently summarize your data, analyze metrics, and visualize the results of those. So for this poll, you'll be able to select one or more if you wish. If there's only a single option that applies, then that's fine as well. And for anyone who replies with other, if you could either in the chat or as a question, let us know what you use. We're very curious to see what our customers are using to handle their reporting needs. All right. Looks like just about everyone has voted. I'll give this another second. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll out. And just so you know, Ben, it looks like a vast majority of people actually use Excel or Google Sheets to do their reporting. And then we have a significant number of people who also use another platform. And I'm going to go ahead and do some investigation to see what those are. But in the meantime, Ben, the floor is yours, and you can take us away.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. That's helpful. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Ray with Zerion Software. I'm a solutions engineer here, and I've been here for about 5, going on 6 years now. And I'm really excited to show you more about what our latest product, Zerion Reports, can do, specifically in terms of dashboarding. So here's a quick agenda of what I'm going to be going over here. Everything from what are dashboards to then going into setting them up, and then talking about a couple of do's and don'ts here at the end. So let's move on here, and we first want to look at really what are dashboards. What are they, and why are they important? So the first main topic is that they do consist of real-time data. Real-time is really important in this because the moment you currently send an existing report, it's most likely out of date because there's been new data that's come in, whether it's from a form or from a database somewhere, or data from a multitude of different sources. So having a dashboard with up-to-date information is always going to be better than a static report that's out of date. Next is key performance indicators. We want to have these on our dashboards because we really want to be able to see what our metrics are that we're trying to hit, whether it's a number of inspections per month or sales goals or whatever these are. These really want to be on your dashboard, kind of front and center for people to see in the most easy way possible. And then finally, the third important thing on dashboards is really having objective-based analytics. And really what that means is you're getting a goal or some requirements maybe from the business or from a client, and you want to make sure that the analytics and the details that you're sharing on this dashboard are relevant to their requirements. If not, it kind of turns it into clutter and something that's not needed. So again, that's really what dashboards are, and we want to really look at going into why should you care about them if you are not using them, and if you are, you may already know. So why should you care about dashboards? The first main point is it's very useful to see a high-level monitoring of this information that's coming in. In the example I'm going to use today, it's actually going to be a sales dashboard that's going to sit in an office, let's say a sales room, so they can see their sales of different products and by individuals. And in this use case, high-level monitoring is really important, so you can see up-to-the-minute sales details all just by turning your head to look at a dashboard or refreshing a page. Also, you can identify problem areas. So in the sales example I used, maybe there's some problem areas such as we're not selling this product, or we're selling a lot of this product. Maybe we can up the price to make more off this one. This is going to allow you to see that very instantaneously via different colors and things you use on the dashboard, as well as just insights you see in front of your face. The next thing is real-time data. Having real-time data is real-time analytics, which actually then goes in turn to real-time decision making. So again, if you see maybe an inspection has failed for a severe reason, maybe someone's going to get hurt, you see that data in real time, you can identify that and you can act on it right away, instead of waiting for the data to come in a couple of days later and maybe there's a safety hazard or something that you could have prevented. And then finally, this is really to evaluate performance towards those specific goals that you may have. So again, it's really important to have all these components inside of a dashboard because they're going to really enhance what you're looking for in terms of the different reports and the different filters and things we can look at adding into here. So moving on, I wanted to do a little comparison in terms of Excel versus dashboards. Most people may not know it, but I mean, pretty much everyone has Excel on their computer and they use it for more things that you can count on both hands. So using Excel is really powerful, but at the same time, there are limitations to it when comparing it to dashboards here. So I just want to kind of list out some of these items here and compare Excel versus dashboards here. So the first thing you're going to see is static reports. So in Excel, as your data is captured, you're building a static report and you're then sending it to someone using like an email collaboration or putting it in a USB drive and handing it over to someone. Again, this is not up-to-date data. By the time you send it to someone or you give them that thumb drive with the Excel file on it, the data is already out of date. There's been new data that's came in that you got to worry about. Farther down, we have small data sets. So Excel, I mean, while it can hold a decent amount of data, when you get over 1 million rows or even less than that, it does start to choke, depending on the size of your machine or anything along those lines. So again, it is not really a scalable solution on that. And finally, the slow feedback loop. So the feedback loop is when maybe data is submitted and you want to act upon something. So giving them a report of some sort, and you want to get the feedback from them as fast as you can. Well, you have to email it, then it takes a day or two till they look at it, and then they write an email back to you. That's 2 or 3 days wasted in the feedback loop. So those are the main things that Excel has that really dashboards can really help out and solve some of those issues. So with dashboards, going down the list here again, you can get real-time reports and dashboards. This is up to the minute, up to the hour information, depending on how fast you're sending it. And it's always available. It's always going to be there for you. You just log in, you refresh your page, or you have it up on a TV monitor on the wall. We've been in companies' offices where they do that same thing. So it's always available, always there for you to see, and always up to the minute data. As well as storing millions of rows of data. It is a very scalable solution. It can store millions and millions of rows, process that information, and it's not going to crash your laptop if you try to do too much on it, since it is cloud-based software. And then finally, on the feedback loop, it's going to be very quick now that the dashboard is always available, always there. If you send it out to someone, they just know right where to go. They refresh their page, they see that information, and they can get back to you instantly. So again, it does really allow for that.
Hey, Ben.
Yeah, is there any questions?
Yeah, well, so I understand that, you know, the benefits of the dashboards and the value you can get out of it. But could you just real briefly define exactly what you mean by a dashboard? Like, are you talking about the table like in Excel, or are you talking about like charts and visualizations? What goes into a dashboard?
Yeah, certainly. So to touch on that a little more, I mean, within Excel, you have tables, and then off of that, you build a pivot view or a bar chart, or show some key performance metrics, and basically build a combination of a bunch of different reports together with key performance indicators on them as well. You can build a very complex dashboard inside of Excel, but the challenge is that it is all of these things that we mentioned here. So again, it's not just taking the data table, but it's building those charts and those graphs off of it and keeping that up to date. So it is more of the individual reports you build, but combining those individual reports do build up to a dashboard.
Awesome, thanks.
And we'll get into a couple more examples here now, actually, what I did want to show. So I have 2 different examples. I'm first going to show this one here, and then I'm going to pass it over to John to show our second example. So I'm going to hop out of the webinar here and move over to my screen, and I'm going to go over an example dashboard that we've built. If anyone's been on our Zerion demos with any of our sales team, you may have seen a dashboard very similar to this. But this dashboard is for a building inspection or a different inspection that goes on. So when there's folks in the field who are collecting these inspection results and submitting them, and then you can see all of this information here on a centralized dashboard. And they had 2 main key performance indicators. They want to hit 200 inspections, so we can see the total number of approved inspections here, as well as they want to drive up their inspection score, because this particular company owns the buildings or the assets that are being inspected. So again, they need to drive this score up more and more. So these things are front and center in your face for you to see. And then farther down, we have a variety of different reports, such as bar charts and line charts that have been generated to see different details about the inspection scores and number of inspections conducted. And there's a variety of other reports down here, such as pivot views to see inspections and scores by each inspector. And then finally at the bottom, we have a query table of all of our raw data that's been captured. So if you really want to drill down into any of these items, that is possible. So again, this is one example of a dashboard, and you may have seen a variety of different ones. You're looking through our site or looking on the interwebs anywhere. So I did also want to pass this over to John to have him go over a dashboard that he built for some nutrition tracking.
Sure, yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. So as we were planning out this webinar and Ben was going through the different components of dashboards that he wanted to present to you all, I let him know that I'd actually been working on this as a bit of a personal project using our software. And I was interested in tracking my nutrition on a new diet. And I thought the best way to do that would be to collect data on it. And then I logically then transitioned into moving reports as a way of visualizing that data to see if the diet is working or not. I thought that there were some pretty cool features about this dashboard that I want to share with you all. At the top, you'll see here how I have a line chart, and you're able to do things like set thresholds, where you get a really quick snapshot to see if the readings are where you want them to be, if they're too high or too low, or if they're within a certain acceptable range. I was also able to set up what's called a stacked bar chart. And so down here, what you'll see is an example of doing a summation for the day of what I've eaten. And it breaks it down, in this case, into the different macronutrients. So I'm looking at my carbohydrates and my proteins, my fats. But this is a nice way to get a visual comparison of the different types of data you may have that you want to represent. And then down here, I have another example of just a different chart where I have a scatter plot, where I'm just laying out the number of hours I've eaten each day. And then I have another line chart for my weight that I've been tracking. And then finally, I have a nice table list of just the different foods I've eaten over the past couple of days. And so this has been a really nice way for me to get a quick snapshot and do some real quick analysis on my daily intake and how I've been progressing along this diet. And I just wanted to go ahead and share that for you all as another example dashboard. So Ben, I'm going to go ahead and give you back presenter so you can continue on with the webinar.
Okay, great, and really I do appreciate you sharing that, John. It's really useful to see how this can be applied at not just the company level, but even at the personal level. And we can see even in scenarios maybe where folks are doing some sort of fitness tracking or anything at a larger scale, something like this would be very useful for them too. So let's start up the slideshow here, and we want to make a little transition into building these dashboards. So we did go through a lot of talking and discussing what and why they're useful and showing a couple of examples. So now it's time to go in and let's start building this, and I'll show you a little DIY on how to get started. But before we get started, we want to look at a couple items. We don't just jump into building these dashboards. We really want to think through this strategically and make sure we know everything up front before we get started. So we want to look at some initial project considerations, and these are four main things that I try to look at for every single project I do with dashboarding. And the first one is, what are the objectives and requirements? So you're getting these requirements or these goals from the business or client or whatever it may be. So they want to track something or measure something. So you very much want to figure out what that is. And along the way, for this, since I'm doing a sales dashboard, I do want to talk about those objectives and requirements. So the main requirements we got from our sales team for this dashboard was they want to see sales by individual, as well as what is like the average deal size. So those are two of the main requirements we got from tracking them. So that's what we need to make sure we put in our dashboard. The next consideration is who is the audience? So who is this going to be given to? Is this going to be public, maybe on your website for everyone to see, or is this going to be private internally between maybe your a small team? So depending on those requirements, you will build your dashboard and put different data in it, depending on that. So in this scenario, we don't want to show all this information to the world. So our audience is just going to be our internal sales team. So we can use our internal sharing that the tool has. Next are which reporting views are needed. And I kind of touched on that earlier with the objectives and results. And this is where these are kind of going to go one and the same because they may know what reporting views they want. But you may have different views such as charts and graphs and pivot views and summary tables and the list goes on and on of all different types of reporting views. But really you want to get to the root of what that reporting view is showing. What's the easiest way to visualize how to see what salesperson is making the most sales? Well, is it a bar chart? Is it a pie chart? Is it a pivot view with a number beside them? So again, which reporting views are needed is definitely a big question. And then finally, where is all this data at? I mean, you're going to have data in a variety of sources. Maybe it's just in our Zerion data collector, or maybe it's inside of the iPhone Builder platform, or a SQL server, or sitting on an individual's laptop. Where is all this data at? You want to make sure you know where the data is at. So is it accessible, and how can you use it? So in my scenario, I know our data is actually through our iForm application. We capture that information through there, so then you can submit it, and we'll have all that sales data in there. So once we have our considerations set up, we can then move on to what this workflow looks like. But before we move on, John, are there any questions?
So far, there have been not too many questions. I've been answering a couple of them through the chat, but people are just interested in seeing how you're going to go about the process of setting up that dashboard and the steps that are involved in creating it.
Okay, great. No, that sounds good. So I do, before we hop in, I do want to go over the workflow of how this will all look at a high level. So the first thing you're going to see on the left-hand side is our Zerion data flow. We need to connect our data flow automation to the reports. So basically, take the data from our middleware tool to write it to a reporting table. And then once the data is in the reporting table, then we need to build our different report views that we were talking about in the previous slide, which are over here on the fourth object. And once we have all those reporting views made, we need to combine all of that into one centralized dashboard. And that's kind of the end of the process there. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop out of here, and we're going to go directly into our Zerion console, and I'm going to show how to set up a Zerion Reports action. So once I open that up, I'm going to see all the different data flows that I have access to, and I'm just going to open up our latest one for the webinar. So inside of here, we're going to see I have 99 different records. They have a couple fields, name, product sold, the cost, and the date of the sale in there. So what we want to do is we want to highlight actions and go under reports and hit Zerion report. So this is going to say when data is submitted, it's going to write to a Zerion report. So first we're going to give this a name, and then we're going to choose a connection. So I'm going to choose my connection. Then we're going to give this a table name. So I'm going to call this webinar demo v2. This is the table name that's going to show up inside of Zerion Reports. And you can simply hit create table. That's going to create a table inside of Zerion Reports so we can use it. And it's going to map out all of our fields here. And we're just going to choose add a new row every time a record is submitted. And then I'm going to hit save on this action. And now we're going to see as the data comes in, it goes into a record set, and then it will write to the Zerion Reports table. So let's hop over into Zerion Reports, so we're able to see what this table looks like. So we're going to click Zerion Reports. And now we're going to see, once it logs us in, we're going to see a new table created on the left-hand side. And we're going to see that it's called Webinar Demo V2. It has our 4 fields that we've specified there. So now what I'm going to do is simulate data being passed through here. So this is going to simulate a record being passed through, but you can just manually rerun the data from this record set into the reports. So I'll just click through this here quickly. And now as I refresh, we should start to see more data being passed into here. So we see we have our name, product sold, the cost, and the date, and more data is being passed in. So we've set up our first table and set up our reports action. So the main first goal in this is getting all the data inside of Zerion Reports, which we have done to date. So the next thing I want to do is show how we can set up some conditional formatting on here. So I mentioned as some of the objectives we're seeing who's doing the most sales. So one thing that I do want to try to point out here, if we do some conditional formatting to highlight any of these rows that sold over $400 in a sale. So we can right click on this and hit conditional formatting. And we can say if the value is greater than 400, let's make our font color black and our background color green. And when I apply this, we're going to see that it's going to highlight any of these green that have over $400. So again, you can do other things like formulas and things like that, but due to time, I'm not going to show all of that. So once we have our table set up, then we need to look at building reports. So let me hop back here into the slide here, and we can talk about the reports a little bit. So based upon the requirements, we really want to look at the different types of reporting views that are available to use within Zerion Reports, and then decide on which ones to use. So we have 4 or 5 listed here, but the first one is a query table. So a query table, it's used for a little more of an advanced use, but basically it allows you to take a data table and write a SQL query over top of it to just view only maybe name and their average sale. So then you can output, instead of 10 or 20 different columns that you may not need, you're focusing on the data that you care about. We also have an enhanced table view that allows you to do different types of grouping and sorting. That's called a summary view, where you're able to say, let's put everything over $400 sales in this table, and then have another drop down for everything under $400. So you can segregate those. There's also a pivot view where you can pivot your data, and that's the one actually we're going to be using today. You can do an additional summary for maybe averages or sums of information, and then you can do anything from bar charts and line charts to spider charts. There's just about every type of chart you can imagine available inside of there. So that should definitely meet those business needs. So let's hop back over into Zerion Reports, and we're going to build a report or two. So the first thing you want to do is open up our data table and look at what type of report we're going to build. So the first one I'm going to build is a pivot view that's going to show the total sales by individual. So let's click New, and then we're going to click New Pivot View. And then we need to choose what we want for our rows, our columns, and our data series here. And there's a couple of directions here, so it should be fairly straightforward to use once you hop in here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the name into rows, because I want the name to be shown down the left-hand side. And I'll generate that. So now I see all the different names in my data set. And then I want to show in the data, actually, the cost, the sum of the sales for each individual. So we can do sum in here. You could actually also do what's their max sale, what's their average sale, and a couple other items here. But now you're going to see it shows each person's name and their total cost here. We can show a grand total. Our whole team sold 29,000 with this dummy data example. So let's save this report here, and we're going to call this total sales by salesperson. So that's the first reporting view that we're going to build, and then we're also going to build another one that is going to show the average sale by individual, but we're going to put it in a bar chart. So again, we go ahead and do the same thing. We'll hit New, and we're going to hit Chart View. And we have to define what we want for our X and our Y axis. So in our X axis, I want to put the individuals' names who are making the sale. And then in the Y axis, I want to put in our, I have that switched around. I want to put the name in the X axis. and I want to put the cost, and I want to choose the average here in our y-axis. And when I generate this graph, we're going to see that along our x, it gives us all of the names of each individual, and then here's what their average sale is. So in this scenario, MJ has the highest average sale, while Tony has the lowest average sale. So again, we're going to save that view, and this is going to be average sale by salesperson. So ideally, you can build many types of different reports and charts. It can get more complex than this. These are some pretty straightforward examples. You're able to specify different colors and tooltips and a variety of other different charts that are available. So now we're going to hop back into the presentation here, and the next thing we want to do once we build our charts is look at customizing our dashboard. So this is one of the most important pieces, because this is going to be what's shown to everyone at the front end. So whether it's sitting at a TV in your office or it's embedded in your website, this is the final view that everyone sees. So it's very important that this is solidified and very easy to understand too. So there's a couple things you put in your dashboard. We'll start from the top here. First is themes. You want to look at putting maybe your logo at the top or different text to describe what this dashboard does, as well as coloring this. Making it, don't use too many colors, but you want to make it appealing enough that it's easy to understand and it maybe follows your company's color schemes or something along those lines. Additionally, you can do filters on here. I use filters all the time in pretty much every dashboard I build, because you're able to specify, even do drop downs based upon products sold and date ranges, and even by salesperson or whatever list of filters you want. So this lets people view only the data they really want to see. We also have the KPIs. You see I have these KPIs front and center, number of unique products sold and the average sale across the whole team. We want to maybe drive that up to $300. So again, the KPIs are very important. And then finally, the reporting views. They may be bar charts, they may be pivot tables, they may just be a query table with your raw data in it. But having the reporting views that all relate to that main objective is super important as well. So now let's build our first dashboard now that we have our reporting views set up and we're ready to go there. So what we want to do to build a new dashboard is you want to hit the new button just like before, and you're going to see a new option here for dashboard. So let's hit that. And what we're going to see here is a blank canvas to start with. And we're going to look on our left-hand side and see all of our different reporting views that we have built in the past. So here's the two that we just did, average sale by salesperson. So I'm just going to take this and just drag it right into here. That's really how easy it is. You just drag it in here, and you can rearrange this how you like. If we want to have this across the whole page, we certainly can. Let's also drag our other one in here, total sales by salesperson. But since we think this can fit over here, let's kind of rearrange this a little bit and move this here so we can see here's our average sale and then our final sales for those individuals. And then it's also important, depending on the business requirements, to either have your raw data down here at the bottom of the dashboard or not. In this scenario, I'm going to choose to do that so they can see every single transaction if they wish. We also can add filters. So to add filters, that's also fairly straightforward. You just hit add user filters here. And depending on the data that you are building your dashboard with, you're going to be able to use filters from those columns. So in this scenario, let's filter by name. That's important to our main objective because we want to filter by salesperson. So we're going to add in a filter for name, maybe also for what product did they sell. And I always like adding this one a timeline filter, so then you're able to see like maybe the last month or this month, what did I sell? And that's really all we have for filters. You can go in here and rename these if you wish, but for sake of time, we'll skip over that. And then the next thing we want to look at doing is adding these KPIs. So it's actually under widget. So we'll hit add widget. And in this scenario, we actually want to choose a data column. So we want to select our widget. So I'm just going to choose a basic value here. And we want to choose our data column. So we need to see what field we want to search, or what table we want to search through. So I'm going to choose webinar demo, and I want to take our cost and do our average cost. And let's hit apply on that. And again, you saw there was multiple options for this, but we're just going to go over a very basic one just to see what the average cost is. So I'm going to go in here to settings and rename this to average cost per sale, and I'm going to apply that. So now you see we have our average cost per sale here as a single KPI. We could go in here and add multiple other ones if we like, but for now I'm not going to show that. So to save some time, I've actually already built this entire dashboard out, so I'm just going to show you what this looks like. So we'll be able to skip to that. But basically, the final product looks something like this. So we have, again, our KPIs that we've added before, our different charts and different graphs that we have inside of here, and filters, and finally the different themes that we've set up. So again, you can see how something like this, once you slowly build your reports and things and combining it all together, can turn out on a very polished finished product for you to use. John, before we move on, do we have any more questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions actually. So one of the things that people were interested about was actually if we can go back to the data flow. I know the focus of this webinar is not on the data flow automation, but people were kind of curious as to what was happening here, and so I just thought I would give them a real quick description of what's happening. So basically, you'll see three objects on the screen. Moving from left to right, you're starting with what's called a webhook, and that's just going to be a unique address. Think of it as a mailing address for this data flow. It's a way of having information come into the data flow. That data is then stored into what's called a record set, which is the middle object. And you can think of that as being a storage container. You're also able to refine data within the record set. So you're able to create multiple record sets, have them branch off from one another, and each one of them can manipulate the data in a certain way. And then finally, what happens is that data that's been manipulated will then be connected to Zerion Reports through what we call an action object. And this was actually where people were having questions, was what these settings were, specifically the body. So Ben, could you go ahead and describe what's happening down there in the body section of this?
Yeah, certainly. So in the body, what you're actually seeing here is these are all your different column headers from Zerion Reports. So we have a name, product sold, cost, all these different items here. So these are the column headers, and then in the value is the data that we're mapping from our previous record set that John was talking about. So whatever value is set for name will actually write to here. So we've seen that there were names such as Tony and MJ and Ben that came in there. Same thing for product sold and product cost. These are all variables that will come from the form and will get mapped into here. So this is standard across pretty much every single data flow action we have. So this is the data from the source, which would be Zerion Reports, and this is the data that you want to map into it.
Awesome. Yeah, and one of the other things I wanted to highlight was that I know it looked like the table populated very quickly when Ben was going through the demo, and that's because it actually mapped those fields automatically. So what it did was it found fields inside of the records from the data that matched the column headings in our reports table. And so then it mapped them dynamically. So it took a lot of that guesswork out. If you have a larger table or a larger report, this can be a time-consuming process, but because it maps it automatically, it's one of the benefits of having everything under that Zerion umbrella. Another question I wanted to have you speak to a little bit, Ben, is do you think that it would be a good idea to just send all the data that you have coming in from your data collection into reports and then trying to manipulate it that way, or do you see a benefit in doing some of that on the data flow side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer for that is kind of it's twofold on this. So on the one side of it, I think it's really important to refine and filter your data inside of here, because there's no sense sending unnecessary data and storage to Zerion Reports when you don't need it. Because if you're sending all the data to the reports, then you're most likely doing some sort of calculations and things on there that are going to slow down this reporting view. where maybe you want to actually perform the calculation in our middleware software, Zerion Data Flow, to be able to do that. So again, I think it all really depends on the project, but the best practice that we've used to date is if it is possible to do in data flow, let's do it there, so there's not as much processing and things taking place on the reporting side to keep that smooth and efficient. But not to say that there is a use case when you may want to send all of it to Zerion Reports and then work with it there.
Sure. And I've got one last question for you. So because everyone here is at least an iForm Builder user, when you end up with a form that has subform data, how are we going to do that? Since a subform is a more complicated data structure and then these report tables are two-dimensional, are you only able to have one report object on a data flow, or is there a way to separate them out?
No, that's a great question. That's a great question. And I think because most people are using subforms nowadays, so it's really important to be able to see how you can split that out. So inside of here, there's two ways to really go about this. The first is you can look at flattening the data out. So again, the flattening would all happen inside of data flow automation, and you basically flatten everything from your parent form and all your subforms into one long row, and then write it to Zerion Reports. Now, based on your reporting requirements, that may not be the case. So you may want to actually split out another branch for your parent form and write that to one Zerion Reports table. Then have another branch for your subform, and then write that to another Zerion Reports table. And then you have two different tables inside Zerion Reports that you can work with to work with your data. And moving off that, inside of Zerion Reports, you're able to do query tables, so you can do things like joins and merges and different groupings inside of there as well. So I think it's either flattening or splitting it up and writing it to separate tables. And this is all going to depend on your business requirements.
Okay, awesome. So you would be able to, like you said, either flatten or separate the data, but then once you have them in reports as individual tables, you're actually able to then go back and almost reconnect those data through the query tables, correct?
Yep, absolutely. And through the power of the query tables using a SQL-like structure, there's a lot of good resources on the web for how to do that, and a lot of power in Zerion Reports for that too.
Thumbs up. That's awesome. Yeah, those were the questions that people had asked.
Okay, great. No, all good questions. And we're actually getting towards the end here. We just have a couple more items here to go over. So once we've built this dashboard, the main things we want to look at doing next are figuring out how we get this dashboard out to others. It's not doing any good use sitting in front of just access to you. You want to share this to others. And in our scenario, we can share it to multiple different locations. So inside of Zerion Reports, you can share it to other users. This means other Zerion Reports users that you have. So you can put in their email address and share it to them, and then they'll be able to have that and see that inside of their Zerion Reports account. You can also give public or private links, meaning that if I give out like a public link, I can send it to anyone in the world, and they can open it up and see that information. And you can specify all the different permissions and things you need on there. You can also do email scheduling. I found this one really powerful for kind of like end of month or end of week reports that folks are sending. So you're easily able to set up a schedule to say at the end of every week, let's send out a PDF of this dashboard or a link to the dashboard or an email about this. This can be all configured inside of here, as well as just exporting the raw information from any different report. You can export it in a variety of different formats. If it's a data table, it may be Excel or CSV, and if it's a report, it might be a PDF. So there's a variety of options for sharing and collaboration on this. So I do want to go over just how to set up a quick private link, and I'm going to share it with everyone in our GoToMeeting control panel. So let's open up our dashboard here, and at the top right is where all these sharing options are. So first you're going to see export, email, share, and then our publish. So if I hit the publish link, we can embed it in a website or blog. It'll give us the code for that, or we can make a permalink for this view. So that's what I'm going to use today. And we have two different permissions, one to access with login and the other one to access without login. So I'm going to hit without login because I want everyone on this call to be able to see the dashboard I built. And you can go in here and change different permissions if you wish. Maybe you want to allow them to export data or even view underlying or drill down. You can set that up. So also you're going to see auto refresh. I like to use this because if it is sitting on a TV monitor or something, you don't want it to just sit there all day and not refresh itself. So this will refresh every 120 seconds or whatever interval you choose. So I'm going to take this this dashboard URL and I'm going to paste it in the chat, and everyone can click on that link, and it's I need to send it to everyone. Okay, so now if you click on that link, you should be able to see that. So let me just open up a new window and show you how this would look. So I'm going to open an incognito window, so it will see that I'm not logged in, and then it's going to show my dashboard and allow me to do all the permissions that I've shown on it. So I didn't allow me to export data, but I allow myself to drill down and see underlying data inside of here. So I can see Kevin and all of his sales, all of his 20, 50, or 60 so sales that he has. So again, the sharing and collaboration tools are pretty priceless in this application for sure. There's a lot that can be said about this in terms of the emailing and the permalinks and different views, because at the end of the day, that's really what the dashboard is all about. It's for the audience on there. So I didn't really have too much more to show on the dashboard side of things. So I hope that was a little helpful in seeing how to configure this kind of from start to finish. And we can see kind of how the full workflow work out if I go back to this slide again. As data is submitted from the form, it is into all these types of views, and then finally into your dashboard and updates that. So again, it's going to be very real time, kind of up to the minute information as data is being submitted through the Zerion platform. So I did want to move on and just show a couple do's and don'ts in terms of dashboarding, because I think these are really important to keep in mind as you're building these. One of the main things is really including this raw data in your dashboard via these query tables that we're mentioning. So it's great to see all the pretty charts and graphs, but sometimes at the end of the day, people want to go down and look at each individual transaction or each record. So including raw data there is going to be really useful, as well as doing some conditional format on these. So identifying problem areas in the sales thing, it was actually for positives, but highlighting anything greater than $400 sales. Adding different data filters in. People want to see only their data or only for a certain timeline. This is going to allow a lot more flexibility in the dashboard instead of a static view. And then also being sure to properly share and publish this thing. Make sure the right people have access. Make sure you're not giving too much access to them, but just the right amount for your requirements. Now on the other side of this, there's things you kind of want to stay away from in dashboarding. These are the four main things we try to stay away from. But first is overusing the text data type. It gets very overused, can slow down the dashboard, and it's hard to analyze data if everything is text. You may want to make your date fields into a true date object, so you can give just a month and year type of representation instead of every single record that was submitted. On the same thought here of performing excessive calculations, you don't want to build too many calculations into your form, because it will slow it down, or into your dashboard. It will slow it down and take it a little longer to generate, especially as the size of data increases. And you do want to make sure your dashboard is not too overly abundant of different reports and graphs. While it may look nice, it's too cluttered and does not get the point across. And lastly, just really be careful when using pie charts. It's not too useful to use with a huge data set, because there might be 100 little slices that are really hard to analyze. So maybe a different view, like a pivot view or bar chart, is a better chart to use on that. So again, there's a lot of definitely functionality inside of the dashboards, but things you want to keep in mind as you're building would be right here. So I do want to go pass this over to John to close this out with our last final poll.
Sure, yeah. And thank you so much, Ben. This was really insightful, especially for I know a lot of people are interested in reports, and they're kind of interested in how they're able to gain more value by having some sort of a dashboard that's going to be refreshed in real time. So what I want to do is I do have one last poll to launch. And this quick exit poll is just asking if you'd like any additional information based on what has been presented today. Just like the other poll, this is going to allow you're able to choose multiple answers if you'd like. And then there was one last question that someone had brought up, and I will be sure to talk about that a little bit more after this poll. And so while this poll is going, I'm actually going to go ahead and change the presenter back over to me, Ben. All right. We'll give this a couple more seconds for the poll. Whoops. And we're good. It looks like, so a lot of people are interested in having more examples of the dashboards in action, and then also getting started with some tutorials on how to use reports. And so those are things that we'll definitely try to focus on doing in the future. Now, what I wanted to show you real quickly before we close this out was the drill down functionality. So Ben had mentioned it earlier in terms of setting up the permissions that you have when you're sharing or when you're publishing your dashboards. And the drill down feature is actually one of the things I thought was really cool. And so if you look at this chart here that I have back from my tracker, I have all the food that I've eaten in one day. And so if I actually click on that day and I choose to drill down, it's going to give me a very similar view, but only for that small subset of data. So now I can look at the nutrition for each of the individual things I've eaten during that day. And then if I wanted to go back, I would just very quickly close out this drill down, and then it would bring me back over to my expanded out view. And so I just wanted to highlight this because the information you put on your dashboard, you want to make sure that the dashboard is easily digested, so there's not too much on there. Like Ben said, we don't want to overly clutter our dashboard. But at the same time, because you're able to go down deeper into the data, you're able to really hold much more information on that dashboard than you may initially think. And it does so without having to overly clutter the dashboard as well. All right, and I'm looking here, and it doesn't look like there's any other questions. So from Ben and I want to thank everybody for tuning in today for this webinar. Within the next 48 hours, you'll be receiving a couple of things. So if you do not currently have an account within Zerion Academy, you'll be having one created for you. Zerion Academy is really good for keeping track of all of your training materials, as well as keeping track of the upcoming webinars and being able to sign up for them and having all of that information in one central location. In addition, we'll also have a recording of this webinar so that you'll be able to reference it. And I know that Ben's going to be sure to include those links that he had for the two dashboards so that you can always reference those in the future as you want. And then we'll be sure to take your feedback into consideration and try to get you all some more information and some more examples of different dashboards that we've built out. So everybody have a good rest of the day, have a good evening, and we hope to see you again soon at our next webinar. Thank you, bye.